Hey. Okay, so let's talk about what's happening in Tunisia. I think this is actually pretty useful to unpack for a couple of reasons, just so that some people can understand things. First of all, I saw a video earlier, which I will link in the description box, which basically said, like, some things you need to know before you come to Uganda. Uganda is one country in Africa that's primarily black. There were some other videos I saw today which were talking about how the South African president or something is not going to arrest President Vladimir Putin when he comes to South Africa, which I think is like next week or something, and that the NATO or some other international group led by the Netherlands would like them to arrest him because of his like crimes against humanity for what's happening in Ukraine. Now, I don't know why. I think the African president has made some really good points. He basically said we are not going to arrest Vladimir Putin because if we did that, we would basically be starting a war between South Africa and Russia, and they aren't interested in that. So this is something just interesting to unpack about like enemies, power, and leadership. The big idea is that sometimes you see something that's very wrong. It's like so wrong. Oh, it's wrong. And you don't do anything about it. Like in this particular case, South Africa is not doing anything about it, but it's because South Africa has to be self interested first, which is another reason why I continue to say I had to make this YouTube channel for black women. And I saw another girl post a video that was like, talking about selfishness, right? It was like, oh, being selfishness is not useful for the community. Being selfish is actually really good for the community because being selfish means that you will survive. Survival is really important. There's a whole other thing about reproduction. I won't go there simply because there were like when I was younger, there were just a lot of things I didn't understand about my own purpose in society, which now I feel like I thoroughly understand. It's really sad though because I feel like my mother, my other family members don't really understand. They all think that we all have a similar purpose, right? Even though we don't have similar stories, we don't have similar genetic DNA. You know what I'm saying? Like we have like different fathers, different, and all of our like, for instance, the cousin that I grew up with, his father is Italian. Like all of his like cultural ancestry is from Italy. Like my father is from Ethiopia. Those are very different places. I mean, they do have Italy definitely colonized parts of Eritrea. That is a big part of the culture. But at the same time, come on, bro. The stories are like super different. Like I'm black. He would be considered white. Like we don't look similar at all, but we are literally blood family members. Like my mother, his mother are actual sisters. Anyway, so the point that I'm trying to make though is that like for me, my representation in terms of like really women in Ethiopia who are like Ethiopia is still considered the developing world. Like girls who are coming online for the first time from Ethiopia like are probably going to look to girls like me just to figure out like, oh, like how did you find meaning, purpose? What are the things that you did that were like enjoyable? This is why like I'm going to always support artists like Tyla because Tyla looks similar to me. I'm going to support artists like Arya Star because Arya Star is African, as am I. Maybe that doesn't make sense to everyone else. It definitely makes sense to me. And that's just what it is. But the point here, so let's go back to Tunisia. I will link this article in the description box. But basically what happened is like Europe, the EU has decided to give $1 billion in like loans and financial grants to curb migration from Europe to Tunisia. So if you haven't been following, what's been happening is a lot of poorer countries in Africa, poor migrants who I think they're climate migrants most likely, or maybe they're just like poverty dwelling migrants, are moving from poorer, blacker parts of Africa to Tunisia, and it's happening in very large numbers. Now, there's a lot of parts in all of the countries in Africa, there's like the really rich people and the really poor people, and it's just always been like that. It's hopefully will change to have some middle class, but in order for that to happen, there needs to be like development and an economy and a lot of things that right now just aren't really happening. So, hopefully these parts of the society will get better. Anyway, let's keep going though. So, I think that the reason that Tunisia is investing a lot of this money into I'm sorry, the EU is investing this money into Tunisia is because like Tunisia is still in Africa. It's North African and it's Arab primarily. But okay, let's maybe go back for a second. So the reason that other parts of Africa immigrating to Tunisia is an issue is because the president basically has been going around saying they're trying to change the demographics of Tunisia by having all of these people immigrate there. Now, a big part of immigration, if you don't understand, is like people are moving places, like they're literally settling. So like they're taking their life that started somewhere. So in some parts, maybe some rural village in Kenya or Ethiopia, sub-Saharan Africa, West Africa. I don't know where all these people are from, but they're the poor people from those places. And I mean, like really, really poor. And for some reason, they probably can't like feed themselves anymore. And so the only option that they have at this point, it could be from war. There's a lot of different reasons, is to like move though to somewhere that's like more developed so that they can like hopefully like work and like survive. Because if they stay there, they will probably die because they've just been watching other people die. Now this has been happening all over Africa for a pretty like long time, right? Anyway, so Tunisia has a problem with this because when you have a whole bunch of like black poor migrants moving somewhere that it's African but it's Arab, like Arabs do not consider themselves black. This is another reason why I too had an issue with what is it, the Cleopatra film that was depicting Cleopatra as black. I was under the impression that she was like North African or Egyptian. And then there were a whole bunch of white people in America who were like, Cleopatra is actually white. I don't know. I think all of it is very strange. I just don't give a shit about Cleopatra. Whatever she was, though, I think they should probably make images of her that are realistic to whomever she is, whatever she was classified as. But I don't think she was black. So, yeah, that weird, whatever. But and the other thing that I thought was very strange is like because Jada Pinkett funded this movie, there are a ton of historical examples of like very rich black empires, and I don't understand why she just wouldn't invest her money to either tell the story of one of those who, if she wants to make more historical accurate representation of black people, she could have done that, or literally just make up a story, or like literally just go pick an act. They're like princesses in Africa right now. She could have just got a video camera and got to tell that story, or really just, I don't know, detailed. There are like really wealthy black people in America right now. You could tell there's a million different stories that you could tell if you want to talk about like powerful women in history. You could go tell the story of Iman Hammond or fucking Mona, supermodels right now who are making really, Lori Harvey, who are making like really big power moves, and for some reason they're just not. Whatever. Why they're not, like, why they don't care about the shit that's happening literally right now, I couldn't explain it to you, but there's shit happening right now, and people who are living incredible princess story lives right now, and those are really interesting stories to tell. So, okay. I was going somewhere else with this though. Oh, so why is Europe, the EU, donating all this money to Tunisia? Well, Tunisia is going to have to use some of the parameters around that money are that they basically take in the migrants who are coming from Africa who have been trying to come to the EU, like Italy. It is very difficult for black Africans who are poor black Africans who have only been around and only basically know the history of colonialism to migrate to Europe and then matriculate and integrate into society. It is very difficult. That's why you see so many stories of like the top boy story. Everybody just stays in these like little apartment complexes. Lots of people do not invest in like education, academia, really other parts of society that are already like well formed. It's just really hard for the races to mix. It's just another reason why I continue to laugh at like the false multiculturalism of America, mostly because like I know the story of my I know my personal right history and story around colonialism, racism, African heritage, like all of these things, right? And it does feel like there's this push for other people to try to like understand my story. So like the American story will continue to have you believe that like Zendaya is what biracialism looks like. And they will have you erasing whatever the biracial story of like someone like me or someone like Yar Shahidi, like in skin complexion we are brown, we look very black, right? Because we are the ones who are considered black, even though we are biracial in terms of what it means. And when you look at Africa and black and how dark some people actually are, and like the difference between that and like me or like a Yara Shahidi, and then you contrast that to a Zendaya, um, you will find that there are way more similarities between myself and Zendaya than there is. How can you say this? There's more space between myself and like a person, maybe from a very somewhere where the people are much darker, right, in Africa. Though I think in terms of the American experience, because so few stories have been heard about marginalization, no one understands that like myself and a person who's like as dark as my sweatshirt, um our black experience in America would be very similar. I don't think it would have to be bad because a lot of things are just based on, social class and money really. So but we would both be considered black, which is I don't think it's a bad thing at all. I'm just saying for me personally, I don't look at the land. I don't look at the American story and think this is my land. This is my story. This is where I would like to be. Like, I look at the land, and I feel like I've always been this way. I look at the country and I think, what could I take? What parts of this experience do I enjoy that I would like to take back with me to Ethiopia? That's how I feel. You don't have to feel that way. Like, you could feel some other way. I can just only express to you like what that's how I personally feel, right? Um, I just think it's just interesting, really. It's very interesting. Yeah, yeah.